Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Hitting for the Cycle on the Empty the Bench podcast network. I'm Hank Indictor, and joining me today for his Hitting for the Cycle debut, that would be Ryan Touhey. And Ryan, I just want to say welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Hank. I'm really happy to be doing this with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. We've been talking baseball for 8 years, ever since we were in college, and now finally are doing a baseball show together. But before we get into all the big news, I just want to give you guys a friendly reminder to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at HFTC And of course, you can also please also follow the Empty the Bench podcast network at ETB Network on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And wouldn't be a plug if I didn't encourage you guys to follow our YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.com/ETB Network, where you can find not just this show, but a lot of other great shows, such as the 3&D, Fruity Cereal, and of course, the namesake show of the network. That would be Empty the Bench. And last but not least, please don't forget to follow the website, etbpodcast.com, for more information and some great blogs as well. And we've been pumping out actually a good amount of blogs on that website. But in any event, without further ado, Ryan, let's talk about the first set of big news that happened. And you were working at MLB Network when this occurred, but as for yours truly, this happened just as I woke up. And when I saw that Shohei Ohtani has torn his UCL, there were a lot of things that went through my mind. Number one was, oh no. And the second one, and I said this probably a few episodes ago, was, and I'm going to say it again, Artie Moreno should be in jail. Remember, there was a debate about whether or not the Angels had a shot at being the wild card. Now, not only are they under 500, they lost not just one, but two of their stars, because Mike Trout also got hurt again. Now he's back on the IL, but this, unfortunately, is an afterthought compared to what happened to their other star. And essentially, what Moreno did was he gambled on this team worse than Pete Rose ever did in his life.
Yeah, I was working late last night when the news broke that Ohtani tore his ulnar collateral ligaments. And the office was just gasping all the way around. And really, this is a devastating blow, obviously, for Ohtani. And I don't think it could have happened at a worst possible time, with this being the last year of his contract with the Angels. And obviously, there's been talk all around baseball this whole year about what teams will offer Ohtani the biggest contract in baseball history. Where's he going to go? Generational talent, obviously, already being considered the greatest baseball player of all time. And he gets just this awful news that his UCL is torn. And usually when you tear your UCL, that typically means Tommy John surgery. And Ohtani has had Tommy John surgery already once in 2019. And not many pitchers that I know off the top of my head have had Tommy John surgery 2 times and have still been effective. The one that jumps to mind in that category is Nathan Eovaldi, who's had the surgery twice and is still pretty effective today, and is a major reason why the Texas Rangers have had a successful regular season so far. But yeah, it's really bad news, obviously, for Ohtani. It's bad news for the Angels. I agree with your assessment that Moreno made this massive gamble on this team. Even though the Angels had a nice little streak going for themselves, I think at the end of July, or right before the trade deadline ended, I never really thought highly of them. I don't think they have enough all the way around, and especially in that pitching rotation or bullpen. Their bullpen, especially, you can't. I think they rely too much on Ohtani for their offense, and Trout as well. And it stinks to see Mike Trout go down again too. He apparently has a very sore left hand, And Trout has really had a hard time staying on the field as of late. I think he's had a good amount of injuries over the past couple of years, and it stinks to see because he's a phenomenal player as well, and he's also considered to be one of the greatest of all time, and he's a class act all the way around. So yeah, it's hard to see, and it's a shame. We don't know really when the next time Ohtani will be pitching. If he decides to undergo surgery in the offseason, he probably won't pitch again until 2025, I would assume. So yeah.
I think we also have to ask this question. Was this injury that he had inevitable? Because if you really look at the pattern with which the Angels used Ohtani, you can make the case that they were burning him out and overusing him.
Well, sure. I mean, I definitely think it's not too surprising to hear that he tore his UCL again. Um, he throws the ball super hard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
his fastball I think averages what 98, 99, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So he's doing that. He's swinging a bat on an everyday basis. So it's definitely going to take a toll on his body in some capacity when you're pitching at that level and you're hitting at that level. And that's why people love watching Ohtani, and that's why he's always in the MVP conversation year after year. So it's not very surprising to see that this happens. I definitely think that he should maybe sometimes take it a little easier on the mound, or you know, or at the plate. But I mean, like force when he's swinging or when he's pitching. Obviously, he has. I think he has the skill. I think he has enough skill to get the job done. You know, every fifth day on the mound and every day at the plate. But but yeah, because he plays this game at such a high level, at a level that not many players, I don't think any player really has played at before. It's unfortunately I kind of saw this coming. I was just waiting to see if it was going to be this year, or if it wasn't going to be this year, it was probably going to be a year or two from now, and it stinks. It really does.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really figured was going to happen as soon as he got that big bank was I figured that eventually he would stop pitching and he'd probably be used solely as a hitter. And I think I was talking about this a little bit with Jennifer. If I don't know whether it was yesterday or a day ago, but the way pitchers are, like, they're bound to hurt their arms pretty easily because you have a lot of them throwing a good amount. And eventually, like, it got to a point where in his career, Babe Ruth had to focus on hitting only. And now I think we're going to end up getting to that point with Shohei Ohtani. And for the record, this is something I've been feeling, injury or not. So, yeah, in that respect, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. I don't think this injury is a major surprise when you really look at everything that's happened in his career. However, with that being said, it doesn't make this whole thing any less devastating because he is a fascinating player to watch. One of the first people I pay attention to whenever I look at the baseball highlights is what Shohei Ohtani does. And whether he's going to continue hitting, we don't know, but we do know for a fact he will definitely not pitch another inning for the remainder of the season. And this is pretty brutal, and I feel bad for those teams to an extent that wanted him, but at the same time, now I have a feeling that teams are going to be more cautious if they want Shohei Ohtani as a free agent. But now let's move on to the next bit of news that has just been happening. Now, last week I talked about this a little bit with Nick, and that is Wander Franco and the allegations. But now it's been reported that Wander Franco has been placed on administrative leave. And look, let me just say right off the bat, I have a feeling that this story will still have legs come next week. Because if he went from being forced to go on the restrictive list to now going on administrative leave, something had to have been found out that's very incriminating, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. Obviously, this is a very, very sensitive subject, and I don't really want to get into it too much. But it's not good. This is really not good. And I mean, Franco obviously, very talented ball player, and I it's a shame. It really is, and it's terrible. It's disgusting. If I've looked at the news, and if it ice, I guess they have found a good amount of evidence to suggest that this did in fact happen,
Mhm.
and that is it's awful. It's absolutely terrible and disgusting, and I don't even know what else to say really about that because it's just so ugh, it's not good at all. And you feel for the um, for the girl's family, and it's yeah. I guess I can.
Well, here's the thing about the girl's family that still makes me sick to my stomach. When they were in this relationship, they consented with them being in it. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I feel for the girl, don't get me wrong,
The
but
girl, that's what I mean. I'm sorry.
for the parents who allowed this to happen and enabled it, like, that's absolutely gross and sickening. Like,
Yeah, it's
she's
terrible.
under the age of consent. For
It's
all we know, he very well could have raped her.
I know. It's
This is a serious monster we're talking about here.
I know it's really bad, and I, it, it's horrible. The whole thing is horrible. It's probably one of the worst news stories to come out in recent memory of a major leaguer, and especially a high profile player like Franco. And like you said, it's despicable. It's disgusting. The fact that the family did give consent is uh, it's it's a subject I really don't like to talk about. It's bad. It's very, very bad.
And not only that, but let me go even further into this.
Hmm.
This is a guy who looked like he was going to be a rising star.
Hmm.
And again, I talked about this with Nick last week, but they really didn't they didn't really get him on the restricted list until there were some reports there that came out. And based on a lot of the evidence, it seems to me like this was a story that good old Rob Manfred was trying to cover up. That's the other thing about it that's definitely sick and shameful. And then there's also this. Not only did the Rays lean on him as their future, as their like star of the future, remember, they gave him what, a 12-year contract
Yeah, it was a
about a
big
year or
one.
two ago?
One of the biggest in race history.
So now you have to wonder, is there any way that they can void this contract should he get into serious trouble? Because I hope for their sake that this can happen. Because the Rays, like, there's nobody in the Rays that's really necessarily at fault because I don't think that, say what you want about Stuart Sternberg, but I'm sure he probably had no idea about what he was doing in the Dominican Republic. And not only that, I'm sure the general manager had no idea about what they were doing either. So one can only hope that they can get that contract void. But regardless of what happens to him, like in the money aspect of this, Ryan, this is a terrible, terrible thing that happened. Not so much to the Rays, but for him. And all I can say to Wander Franco is he screwed up big time. And I have a feeling after when all this, regardless of what happens, he's probably going to never play another Major League Baseball game again.
Yeah, and honestly, he shouldn't. This goes beyond baseball. This is life, obviously, and I feel it. I'm very sensitive when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's just it's bad. I think that's the best way you can put it. It was, and the Rays actually had, they gave him an 11-year, $182 million contract, and that started last year. So this was the second year of the contract. And if the Rays are somehow able to void the contract, then which I think they deserve. Honestly, I think the Rays deserve to have that contract voided. How they do that, I think it would have to maybe go to court. I don't know exactly. I really don't. But yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at it's disgusting. It's sickening. I hate even talking about it. To be honest, it's terrible.
Yeah, let's move on
Yes,
because I
please.
would say the less said about this, the better. But
Yeah,
now let's talk about the other bit of drama that went on this past weekend. So, Tommy Pham, during the San Diego Padres and Arizona Diamondbacks series, ended up getting heckled by some Padres fans during a game. And unfortunately, this caused Pham to lose his cool. And as a result of him losing his cool, he then took his anger out on social media. But so, regardless of who you side in that alone, if this was the extent of what happened, you would be we would probably be shaming both the fans who attacked him and Tommy Pham himself. Because I mean, look, I don't know what those fans said, but I'm sure whatever they did say to him, it's possible that they went too far. However, with that being said, and we've talked about this before on this network when it comes to NBA stars such as Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and how they both should not be talking to other fans on social media. If I'm going to say that about those guys who make no mistake, I'm not big fans of when it comes to the NBA, then unfortunately I have to say the same thing about Tommy Pham. Like, lashing out at other fans is a bad look and very unprofessional. Now, having said all that, when you go after and cyberbully a 13-year-old boy, that is where you cross the line because he had nothing to do with the game itself. He's a minor, and whenever you not only bring a child, let alone somebody else's family, into heckling and trash talking or whatnot, that is absolutely inappropriate and unacceptable.
Yep, absolutely. I watched the video with Pham and the fans at Petco Park. I believe this was over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken, when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, according to Pham, the fan who was heckling him called him a piece of you know what, and
Yeah.
according to the fan, and from the fans' perspective, they said that they never uttered that, and but they did admit they were heckling him, but it was more of just your casual baseball heckle. Um, I watched the video. I didn't really see enough evidence to determine who exactly was right as to what started the whole confrontation, or but I know that but I watched the rest of it obviously, and Pham got right up to the net where the fans sit right behind home plate, and they went at it, and yeah, I mean obviously heckling's part of the game. When you're a baseball player, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get heckled at some point, whether you're whether you're a big star or a lesser known name. Heckling's just part of the game.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there are lines that are crossed sometimes when it comes to heckling. Fans sometimes do need to watch what they say and how they say it to the players. At the end of the day, the players are people too, so I understand players not liking to be heckled. I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, but they also have to understand sometimes that they're part of the entertainment business, and heckling is part of the entertainment aspect of baseball, and it always has been, and it's always going to be. So, I definitely think Pham needs to do a better job sometimes of controlling his emotions when he does get heckled or something like that. Again, I don't know if you know, you know, being called a a piece of what. Nobody. Yes, that's a little ridiculous. And it's like you can do a better job if you want to say, "Fam, you stink, you're a bum," or whatever. All right, I can understand that a little bit. If the fan did call him that, then I can understand Pham being a little upset. But he went in, but it just escalated a little bit. It got pretty ugly, and I think Pham, yeah, I definitely think Pham needs to maybe not pay attention so much about it. I think Pham could be maybe an even better player at times. Sometimes I think he can be his own worst enemy at times when he's on the field. And the fans, if they did say that, then like, come on, guys, like,
Yeah,
you can boo him, say you stink or whatnot, but don't go to that level. Like, it's a little ridiculous. I mean, I've never, I've booed, obviously. I've said you stink or whatever, but you always got to watch it. I mean, I think more and more players nowadays, you're seeing more confrontations, obviously, between fans and players, obviously with social media, because everybody's got a camera. So this is obviously going to get out. But this is nothing new. This has been going on for forever. And in regards to his nephew being heckled on or being attacked verbally online, that's absolutely ridiculous. And like you said, it's embarrassing. There's no room for any of that stuff at all. Leave the kid alone. Let him live his life. What does he got to do with anything? That's stupid. That's a whole that is completely, and that's somebody looking for attention, trying to make themselves stand out in any way, shape, or form. So shame on those who went after his nephew. He had nothing to do with this.
I would agree. Now, did you by any chance happen to see his Instagram post after this happened?
Yeah, or I saw it. Was it a tweet? I think I saw
it was an Instagram post. He posted pictures of what he did in against the
Diamondbacks, yes,
or against the Padres, right, and what he basically had captioned it was silence all the haters with success or something along those lines. And then they put the money bag emoji and then the 100%, and it was him rounding the base after home run. Now, as it turned out, he actually had the last laugh. He got 5 hits in that series, 2 of which were home runs. And this was a big series win for the Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks actually have a good chance now with that series win of being in the playoffs. But let me talk about this tweet from August 20th. He said, "Since this guy wants to block me and act like his friend is a model citizen, I'll put 100,000 up if he passes a lie detector test saying he didn't call me a piece of shit. If he doesn't pass, which he won't, MLB bans him for life for all stadiums." That's going a little too far when it comes to Twitter.
Yeah, and look, like I said, no ball player likes to be heckled, obviously, and being called a piece of is ridiculous, especially for a baseball game. But I also think that Pham just needs to like move on from it. Like, who cares what this person thinks about you? You're playing Major League Baseball. You're living a dream. Don't care about what some fan thinks about you. They're just trying to get under your skin, and they're trying to make you look bad. So I would just say like there's no need to do that. We all know you're a ball player, and we all know that you're a solid ball player. So he didn't need to do that. I'll leave it at that.
But in any event, if he let his play do the talking, at least he was able to back it up with how he did in that series.
Yeah.
I will give him that. But with that having been said, though, I think the only person that we know really was in the wrong was those who attacked his 13-year-old nephew. Now, having said that, I do want to point out that Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, and Torey Lovullo both went out and showed their support. I don't know if Torey Lovullo's message was tweeted, but Steve Cohen sent out a tweet saying Tommy Pham was a great Met, and we 100% back him. So it seems like he definitely is getting the support, but again, doesn't change the fact that he was in the wrong for going after those fans and letting it escalate to social media. I think he definitely, as much as you want to shame the fans, and even if they were truly in the wrong, Tommy Pham has to be the adult and be the better person and not let the emotion get to him and go on social media. So moving right along, and speaking of, moving on, the Chicago White Sox have just cleaned house. Now, I did a short video about this on the Instagram page, the Facebook, and the Twitter, where I talked about the White Sox firing President Kenny Williams and GM Rick Hahn. And first and foremost, off the bat, I just want to say this was a move that was definitely overdue. Because, you look at where the White Sox were a few years ago. There was talk that they would have a bright future. And, they had that playoff run in 2020, which, I don't know what you really want to make of that, because that was, a weird season.
Mm-hmm.
But then they fire Rick Renteria. They hire Tony La Russa. Now, obviously that move was met with a lot of criticism, but then, it didn't really matter, because even though La Russa had his moments where he truly probably did need to be put in the retirement home, the White Sox still won that division, because that's the NL Central we're talking about. So they essentially won that by default. And a year later, it looked like they were going to build off that success, but then not only did they fail to do that, I don't think they even finished above 500.
No, yeah.
And then we move over to a year later, they completely tank, and as a result, they end up having to blow it up at the trade deadline, which, was probably the right thing to do. And then you have the Tim Anderson, Jose Ramirez fiasco. And now you have the GM and the president being fired. And remember, this came not long after Lance Lynn went out of his way to criticize the White Sox as having a toxic culture. So, in other words, all of this was fairly inevitable, in my opinion. And I have a feeling that after the season, Pedro Grifol is pretty much going to be a dead man walking.
Yeah, I agree. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, La Russa is back with the White Sox. He's now a consultant with them. So La Russa is back in the organization. But yeah, I agree with your assumption that that this was predictable, and it's no secret that the White Sox have kind of been in a limbo for God knows how long at this point. Ever since they won the World Series 18 years ago in 2005, they've really done nothing. They've won the Central. They won the Central once in 2008, and they won it again in 2020. And they won it again in 2021. They made it to the playoffs again in 2020. But like you said, that was a weird season. And that's really it. They really have not done anything since they won the World Series all those years ago. So they completely blew it up at the beginning of the 2010s to try and restock on their farm system. They were trying the same approach the Astros tried, but it completely blew up in their face. Now, the White Sox did develop a lot of talent during the 2010s, or maybe some. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot. They developed some talent. You obviously had Jose Abreu come in, and he became the face of the franchise for a solid decade. They obviously had Tim Anderson come in. They have recently brought in guys like Dylan Cease and Michael Kopech to help with that rotation. But other than that, I mean, you look around the team, there was never really anybody who like stood out and was like a big name around the league. The White Sox really have struggled to find like anybody who stands out in the league to give them their own identity in a way, I feel. I mean,
now,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to cut you off, but you mentioned Michael Kopech. I do want to point out he came in the Chris Sale trade, if I remember correctly.
I think he did, yes. I know that Cease was also initially drafted by the Cubs, but he came over. Was it the Quintana deal? I believe that he came over in.
Yeah, and it looked like the White Sox were getting a lot of pieces for the future in those trades. Now, in retrospect, you look at some of those deals and see, oh, wow, they got a steal. But, it really just goes to show you the old saying that I've used before, and I know plenty of other people have used before. Prospects are prospects or prospects are prospects. Like, you know, if we knew that they were going to have a good future, we'd call them guaranteed success instead of prospect. But prospects are just that, prospects. But I think besides just the fact that they haven't really gotten as many genuine superstars that really stood out, I think really you have to look at the common denominator of why the White Sox have failed. And that starts all the way at the top. And this would be the same guy who is the culprit for the Bulls having to like tear everything down after the late 90s. I am, of course, referring to good old Jerry Reinsdorf. Yes, that's my new name for him because, listen, as he's been the owner of the White Sox for what, 40 years now?
Yeah, a long time.
And when you look at where the White Sox have been, remember, he was the one that irrationally fired Tony La Russa many years ago in the 80s. And they really haven't had many good stretches of baseball because they won the division 83. They fired Tony La Russa. Don't really do anything again until the early 90s, where they win the division, they lose to the Blue Jays. They probably would have had a shot at 94, but we'll never know because of the strike. Don't really do anything again until 2000, where they finish in first, lose the division series. Don't do anything again until they hire Ozzie. And then they somehow luck out in 2005 because not only did they hire the, volatile Ozzie Guillen, but they also built a really good team around him that like fit the chemistry. So that was pretty much the definition of a one-year wonder, that White Sox team. And ever since then, I don't think they've even, unless you want to count that game 163 against the Twins, I don't really think the White Sox have done anything of note within the last 15 years. And when you look at the fact that, he's hired guys like Tony La Russa, who's slowly approaching 80 years old, ownership has to take some responsibility in this too. And if you look at Jerry Reinsdorf's past track record of success, he has notoriously been arguably the Mr. Krabs of baseball, if we want to go there. Because look at the biggest contract the White Sox have ever handed out. The one they gave to Andrew Benintendi. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know about the state of the White Sox as a franchise, that goes to show you that they need to be sprayed with even more Lysol than possible.
You hit the nail on the head. Or if you really want to find out what it's like rooting for the White Sox, listen to that fan rant all the way back at the beginning of the season where that guy called into the Chicago radio show and just lit into the White Sox in the front office for like a solid 11 minutes. I think that was like in May or something like that. But White Sox.
I love what Keith Bell said, by the way. He goes, "Hey, White Sox, if you really want a good GM, give me a call. I could turn around your organization. It's not that hard." I mean, I don't know if I agree that it's not that hard, but at the same time, surely he would be infinitely better than who they currently have. But then again, the question also needs to be asked: how much of it do you blame on Rick Hahn and or Kenny Williams? And how much of it do you blame on Tony La Russa? Because I feel like some of those moves had a lot to do with, or I'm sorry, not Tony La Russa, Jerry Reinsdorf. Because I feel like a lot of those moves had to do with management. Like, are you honestly going to sit here, look me in the eye, and tell me that Tony La Russa was Rick Hahn's brilliant idea?
No, I agree with you. I definitely look at management more than anything else when it comes to where the White Sox are at right now. I mean, the White Sox have been doing 360s where they just end right back where they have been. They've been just running around in circles. And, going back to how little they've done over the past 2 decades almost. Even that Central Division championship that they won 2 years ago in 2021, they won 93 and 69. So that's respectable. That's very respectable. But they were also playing in a very weak division. Back then it was still 19 times a year you're playing against your divisional opponents. So they were able to rack up the wins against their division. And even, in that season, I never really thought that they were that much of a threat to win the World Series especially when they drew the Astros in the playoffs. I thought they have no chance.
Oh yeah, no.
I never really thought highly of them, and I think the biggest offseason move in Rick Hahn's career, besides I guess Benintendi coming in this past season, the only other significant offseason move that I can remember him making was back in right before the start of the 2015 season when he had that press conference for Melky Cabrera, David Robertson, and Jeff Samardzija. That was like the only other time I can remember him like actually going out and getting some solid moves.
I'm sorry, but the thought of a press conference for those three guys that you mentioned, that just shows you the state of the White Sox in a nutshell.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were saying that was like that was the move that they were going to try. They were going to try and build so they brought in those three guys, and they were going to try and like construct the team around those three guys with their prospects. And I don't really think none of them lasted long in Chicago. I don't think any of them lasted like 3 years in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Touhey, I can imagine I can think about that press conference from back then. I can imagine there was tumbleweeds in that press conference. By the way, Ozzie Ian on the White Sox studio show, he said Jim Thome should be considered for What? Let me just say this. When you're hearing that Lance Lynn is calling your organization toxic, which, again, given what's been going on, given that Lance Lynn's had a long career and he hasn't had much to hide, and given that there's still drama even with the managing change, and given that you have former major leaguers wanting either themselves or other major leaguers to run the Chicago White Sox, oh boy. I mean, again, I don't know if I don't know how realistic the idea of Jim Thome wanting to be a GM would be. I'm not even sure if Jim Thome wants to be the GM, but Heath Bell and Jim Thome can't be much worse than what they currently had.
No,
again, I'm not sure if anybody really wants to be the GM of the White Sox, at least as long as Ryan Scoof is still the owner.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be the general manager of the Chicago White Sox, then you got a lot of work on your hands, to say the least. You kind of have to erase everything on your piece of paper and your essay that you have to erase your whole entire essay that you've spent, days or weeks writing, and then you got to start all over again from scratch. That's basically what it is. It's frustrating for White Sox fans, obviously, and where they are right now, I don't really see them getting better anytime soon.
I'm going to say this again. 2005 is becoming more and more like an afterthought, and it's funny because that may have been one of the earlier World Series runs that I can remember, and it's funny that I mentioned that because that White Sox team was like pretty dominant, but yet who knew that after that, many people would kind of forget about that White Sox team after a while? Like, I really do think they consider the 2005 White Sox as the forgotten champions, especially given the series of events that happened since then. But yeah, that's a team that needs more than just Lysol and disinfectant spray. They need Jerry Ryan's goof to sell the team. And I know there's been rumors that that's happening, and there's also rumors that they're looking for a new ballpark, but whether that all comes to fruition, we'll see. And where the White Sox move to, I don't know if it's going to be like in the downtown city or whether it's even going to be in a suburb of Chicago, but time will tell. All I know is they had to hit the reset button, but I think Griffol's going to be out the door. And make no mistake, I don't necessarily know that it's entirely Griffol's fault, but do I think he's necessarily done the best job? No, but at the same time, I don't think he was necessarily set up to succeed just by being hired by the White Sox. Yeah. And I have a feeling that the only reason he's still there is because nobody wants to be an interim manager of this team.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about a team that's more worthy of our time, shall we? The Seattle Mariners have been absolutely on fire. Now, Ironically, they actually lost an extra inning game yesterday to the Chicago White Sox in extra innings, and they actually blew a lead in the 9th inning. But up until then, the Mariners actually had an 8-game winning streak. And believe it or not, that was the second time this month that they had an 8-game winning streak. So they have been on fire. And as I pull up the standings right now in front of me, the Mariners are now in 3rd place in the AL West, but they're only 1.5 games behind Texas and 2 in the all-important loss column, as our buddy John Sterling likes to say. And they're also tied in the all-important loss column with the Houston Astros of all teams. So, in other words, if you were in a car and you were an AL West team, your mirror that says danger, objects slowly
closer
than they seem, there would be a Mariners logo on that.
Yeah, they're right on both of their heels, them being Texas and Houston. And yeah, like you said, the Mariners have been red hot. They've had 2 8-game win streaks, so they have won 16 of their last 20. And Julio Rodriguez, obviously, as you see right here on this graphic, 17 hits in 4 games. It's outrageous how well he's been playing, and he becomes the first manager in history to have 3 4-hit games in a row. And you think about the talent that the Mariners have had over the years, from Griffey to A-Rod to Ichiro even. Ichiro was a hitting machine, and none of them have ever done that, and Julio Rodriguez is the first Mariner in history to do that. He's obviously a main reason for this stretch for the Mariners. Teoscar Hernandez has been red hot too. He's been hitting .356 with a 400 on-base percentage and slugging .542. And even the games that the Mariners have lost, they've lost 4 games during this stretch. Obviously, you mentioned the 5-4 loss to the White Sox yesterday. But the games that they've lost, they have stayed in all of these games. They lost 1-0 to the Orioles. They lost 5-3 to the Orioles, and they lost 7-6 to the Royals. So even in the games that they've lost, they've made it interesting. They've never been blown out. It's never been out of reach for them. So they've stayed competitive throughout this whole time, and it's very impressive to see how the Mariners have really risen. And the fact that they're only a game and a half out for the division lead in the AL West, it's going to be a fun race down the stretch in that division.
Now, let me go back to what you said about Julio Rodriguez. So we said that he had consecutive 4-hit games in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, not only is he the first Mariner to do that, he's the first player in nearly a century to have at least 15 hits in a 4-game stretch. The last player to do that was Milt Stock for the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1925.
98
So forget about the Mariners. This is pretty historic stuff. And, I was on record for saying this last year. I thought Julio Rodriguez deserved to have more consideration in the MVP voting. And obviously, we know one of the only reasons that didn't happen was because of some guy named Ohtani and another guy. You may have heard of him. He wears 99. He is named Judge, the guy on my shirt right here.
Yeah.
And now this year, I think with what Ohtani's been doing, it's ridiculous and mind-blowing to see that Julio Rodriguez might be a mere afterthought because, the difference between Ohtani and J-Rod, and again, I'm not saying this to disparage Ohtani and all, because after all, he only gets to pitch once every 5 times, and he only gets to bat through an order once every 9 times. But when you look at the Mariners and how they have asserted themselves into the division race, you can't tell me that guy does not deserve MVP consideration at all, because he's been a big help in carrying them. They actually swept the Astros in Houston this past weekend too.
They've dominated the Astros this season.
They did.
They've dominated them. They've played each other 10 times this year, and the Mariners are 8-2 against them this year. So they're getting some revenge for their playoff elimination by them from last year. And usually, ever since they came to the American League and ever since they've started this run, the Astros have just dominated the Mariners. So the Mariners are kind of giving them a little taste of their own medicine this year.
I think they're definitely a team that you have to look out for come playoff time. Because usually, I don't know if you noticed, but usually when the teams get hot in the second half, those are the ones that are generally the more dangerous team come playoff time. So, in other words, now, if you're the Texas Rangers or if you're the Houston Astros, you have to be even more wary because, not only is your division title on the line, you have another team to worry about. And I think whoever loses out on it, like, they could get eliminated pretty quickly because of that wild card round. Like, you want to win the division so that you can have that extra time to like set up your pitching staff for the division series. So I think that's definitely huge for the Mariners. And I also think that playoff run that they had last year really helped them because, remember, the Mariners went 20 years without a playoff spot. Up until last year, they had the longest streak of any team that didn't make it. And, I think I said it last year too, and I stand by it now. I knew that re-signing Julio Rodriguez was going to help them because essentially what they did was they locked him up because they saw him as a part of their long-term future. And so far, I know it's only the first year of a mega deal, but that is paying early dividends for the Seattle Mariners. And there's no telling how he can help them come the future. And a lot of teams that really are successful are the ones that tend to lock up their young superstars for a long time. Just look at the Atlanta Braves as an example.
Yeah, I mean, the Mariners, Julio, obviously the reigning American League Rookie of the Year. They wasted no time in locking him up full time. They just went for it. They liked what they saw immediately from this kid, and he was a major reason why the Mariners turned it around last year too, obviously. So they just said, you know what, this is somebody who we can build around, and folk help, propel us to a World Series. So they were smart and they locked up Julio, and he's only 22, I think, right this season. I think he's 22, 23. So they locked him up nice and early. They're gonna get the his prime years. So that's a very good move by the Mariners. And I'm just looking at the Mariners' remaining schedule for this season. So the Mariners have a relatively light week ahead of them. They host the Royals, and they host the A's at home. But then they go to the Mets, but then their schedule kind of gets tough after their series against the Mets. They go to Cincinnati, go to Tampa, host the Angels. Then they got to host the Dodgers, but then they go to Oakland, and then they end their season with 7 games against the Rangers in 10 days. And that is sandwiched around a 3-game set against the Astros. So they have the Rangers, Astros, and Rangers to end the season. So,
oh my gosh, talk about a gauntlet.
Yeah.
Talk about a gauntlet. But yeah, that could probably be the series that determines where teams are come playoff time. And this is why I really love watching this stretch of baseball, because it really decides a lot. You're in the heat of September with the pennant race. I know many people have felt like the adding of the wild cards can, minimize the excitement, but I disagree. I think you can still get a little bit of the same feel for a pennant race regardless.
Yeah. And the Mariners are an exciting team. And the Mariners, it's a fascinating story too. The Mariners are the only major league team that has still yet to appear in a World Series. This is a team that's been in existence since 1977, and they have never won a pennant. So it'll make for a great story if they are able to, go all the way at some point. With Julio locked up for a long term, this is a window now for the Mariners. They don't want to blow it. They really want to capitalize on this opportunity and get to the World Series within the next couple of years, at least one. They went 21 years without getting to the postseason. Now, last year obviously was their first year back since 2001. So, they got their foot back in the water. And obviously the Astros were too much for them. They were too much for everybody last year.
Well, yeah, nobody was beating the Astros.
And yeah, that was a learning experience for them. They've been there now. They know what it's like, and hopefully they can take that. Hopefully for them, they can take that knowledge and experience and bring it into this season and the foreseeable future. And hopefully they can finally hoist an American League pennant over American League pennant banner at T-Mobile Park, and maybe even a World Championship. We'll see what happens with them, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think if that does happen, you're going to see T-Mobile Park rocking because I think they do care about baseball in Seattle. It's just they haven't really had.
Definitely care. They have great fans.
But anyways, Touhey, there's a reason that I have had to save this last topic for last, and
time to torture ourselves.
Why prolong the inevitable? We have to rant about our beloved New York Yankees. They have lost, to quote Mr. Rooney from Ferris Bueller, 9 times in a row. Now, granted, they did win yesterday before this recording, so that's all fine, good, and dandy. Aaron Judge hit 3 home runs and had 6 RBIs. Again, all fine, good, and dandy, especially that grand slam he hit in the center field. But let's get back to reality a little bit. This was a 9-1 win against the loser Washington Nationals. This was also their first win since, oh gosh, I can't even remember. That's how bad of a losing
The Marlins blowout.
Yes, the Marlins blowout. And remember, they have not even had a lead since the game against the Atlanta Braves. And by the way, how they had a lead against the Atlanta Braves, I have absolutely no idea, and that is beyond me. But I do want to point out that their win yesterday was just their 7th since the trade deadline. 7th! Who was it? Remind me again, but wasn't it Brian Cashman who said, "Oh, we didn't really do anything about the trade deadline because we're in it to win it. We have reinforcements coming back." Well, guess what? One of your reinforcements got injured yet again, and you only just got Rodon back from an injury not too long ago. What reinforcements are we talking about? And not only that, Garrett Cole has been the one constant in your rotation, and even he got lit up against the fucking Boston Red Sox. In it to win what? The Tank Bowl?
Yeah, I think.
And by the way, I'm not finished. Oh boy, it gets worse.
Let it out.
Do you want to know what the batting average is?
Let me guess. I'm going to guess. 229.
Worse.
Wow.
This was during the 9-game losing streak. They had a 157 batting average. 20 runs in 72 innings. 80-plus strikeouts. And only 5 hits with runners in scoring position. 41 men left on base. Ryan, I'm going to go on a limb to say that the last time they were this bad with runners in scoring position, Bobby Mercer was on the team.
Yeah, this is easily the worst Yankee team of our lifetime. It's the Yankees right now obviously are in a position to get their first losing season since 1992. That was 4 years before you were born, 5 years before I was born. And that was before Paul O'Neill became a Yankee. That was before a lot of things happened.
George Bush was president. The father, not the son.
Yeah, the father was the president. And it's been a rough year for the Yankees, to say the least. And going into this season, I wasn't too optimistic, to be honest with you. And I mean, yes, the biggest offseason move obviously was bringing in Carlos Rodon. That was obviously their big splash during the offseason. Now, granted, a lot of Yankee fans wanted him. I was not opposed to bringing him in because the old saying, you can never have enough pitching, rings true. So I was not opposed to that. What annoyed me was that they did not improve their offense whatsoever. They went into the season hoping that some of these guys would just rebound and pick it up where they began last season when they went off on that insane run through the middle of June or through the middle of July, I should say. Because once the All-Star break ended last year, they were 500 basically at best, and the team has just been bad to watch. They're boring to watch. And Susan Wallman even was on a hot mic a couple of days ago. She was caught saying, "God, this is bad," or "God, this is boring." If when Susan Waldman is saying, "God, this is boring," you know the team is boring.
And guess what, Susan? You're saying what we're all thinking.
Exactly.
That is baseball, Susan. That's
And
2023 Yankees baseball, Susan.
But yeah, the team is obviously it's not a good team. It's not a very well constructed team. I mean, 2 days ago, I forget who was the starter for the Nationals for the first game against the Yankees, but it was a right-handed pitcher. I forget the guy's name. He was a native.
Gray.
Right.
He actually played against me when I was in high school.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, no, he went to New Rochelle.
Yeah, and he's a right-hand. I mean, if you want to find out just how bad the Yankees 2023 season is gone, let me use that game as an example. That game was obviously against the right-handed starting pitcher. The Yankees, now granted, the Nationals are not a good team, obviously. Neither are the Yankees. The Yankees lost the game 2-1. They only had 2 hits that whole entire game, and both of those hits were by Ben Rortvedt. Hank, what's the difference between Ben Rortvedt and everybody else in that lineup, besides the position he plays?
There's too many differences to answer that question, Ryan.
What's the biggest difference, I guess?
He's like just a regular, random schlub. I don't know.
He's left-handed. He's a left-handed.
See, Ryan, the Yankees have just been so bad, they've hurt my brain. Have you noticed?
The Yankees have the only lefties the Yankees sport right now are Ben Rortvedt, Oswaldo Cabrera, and McKinney's hurt now, and so it's bad. Like, they have no regular lefties in that lineup, and they play in a stadium built for lefties. So obviously, I'm honestly not too surprised that they've struggled. I've been honestly like trying to calm myself down over the past couple of years, saying, "Don't worry, they'll at least finish above 500. They'll at least finish above 500 because they always do." But a lack of offense can only hurt you so much, and this is finally the year where it's hurt them to the point where they're facing their first losing season since 1992. And they got nobody else to blame but themselves. And Brian Cashman flat out admitted yesterday in a press conference this season has been a disaster.
Yeah, daylight dollar short there, buddy. And I'm sorry, I just want to bring up one thing before we sign off this. 1-8 against the Red Sox. And even in that one win, they kind of got lucky because they only won that game by a score of 3-2.
You look at the Red Sox lineup, it's full of lefties.
Yeah. Yeah, that tells you all you need to know. And they're such a disgrace. I know they won yesterday, but guess what? Newsflash, winning does not cure all. And I'm sorry to end this.
Yep.
I'm sorry to end the show on a low note, but that's the reality of the situation, and I cannot wait for this Yankee season to be over. And I never thought I'd be saying that, but that's the reality of it. Just give me the Giants football. But anyways, Ryan, I want to thank you again for joining me on Hitting for the Cycle, and I can't wait to run it back with you next week. Thank you so much for hopping on and becoming a new member of our team.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope I did a good job.
Oh, you did. Well, anyways, that'll about wrap it up for, I believe we're at the Yogi Berra episode of Hitting for the Cycle, number 8. I'm Hank Indictor. That's Ryan Touhey. And before we go, I want you to remind you guys, please don't forget to follow us on all of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook, X, and Instagram at HFTC ETB. I will be posting a good amount of short videos on a daily basis. And Ryan, if you want to contribute to those short videos, please feel free and message me. And also, don't forget to follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. As I said, we got a lot more content besides this one, some great shows for you. And please don't forget to follow our YouTube channel. Find us at youtube.com/ETB Network. And last but not least, don't forget to check out our website, etbpodcast.com. Check out some good blogs and you'll find some more information as well. Folks, that'll wrap it up for Hitting for the Cycle, episode 8. On behalf of Ryan Touhey, I'm Hank Indictor, and we will see you guys next week.